Hello, Michael. I continue to comment your videos so that when you discover my channel, you will notice that I can read your mind. Not completely, but parts of your mind. And in this video, I will comment your videos about the Consilience of the Globalist Doctrine and the importance of radical skepticism. And I follow the chronological order of your video, and I make comments. You talk about the need to adopt radical systematic skepticism concerning what comes out of academia. Otherwise, academia would be just propaganda. But in my intellectual development, I have become a radical skeptic. Hegel says in the Phenomenology of Mind that skepticism is a moment in the development of consciousness. And the kind of skepticism that I have developed is, I said to myself, maybe the individual Hegel did not really exist. Maybe this book is a phenomenon produced by my mind. If I were the consciousness of spirit, the phenomenology of spirit would be a phenomenon produced by my consciousness. This is the kind of skepticism that I have developed, and strangely, the more I become skeptical about the nature of reality, the more I understand reality. So, yeah. You talk about Marie Cachet and Varg Vikernes, and you said that if they were not published scholars, because they are not published scholars, they are attacked by academia. But this is a very Hegelian idea, namely that it is by rejecting academic knowledge on the topics of paganism, in this case, that knowledge about paganism can be gathered. There is a pagan community growing, Varg, Marie Cachet, Oleg, Caroline Emmerich, partly you, but you've kind of gone astray. But and these people are producing real knowledge about paganism, the traditional European religion, because they detach themselves from academic knowledge. And this is Hegelian. It is by negating formal training that one can acquire knowledge. And one day maybe you will understand that the reason why I understand Hegel so much is because I never took any lecture on the philosophy of Hegel. And the reason why you don't understand Hegel as of now is precisely because you have been trained formally as a Hegelian. But someday you will understand Hegel. You talk about the globalist project of mixing races, dissolving national borders, creating the one world government. The global elites are the most powerful clique in all of history. When you talk about 19th century physics, which gave way to a strange, non-rational concepts, the purpose of this video is to try to explain that what we call strange, mysterious, irrational, nonsensical, absurd, is precisely what Hegel calls vernünftig, what Hegel calls rational. And I will illustrate later with the example of the queer Muslim quantum physicist. I will illustrate why this is typically Hegelian. You say that physics, history, archaeology have to be rewritten in order to fit the globalist agenda. And now I have listed a few illustrations of dialectics because people associate Hegel with dialectics. Every time a strange occurrence happens, people who are vaguely knowledgeable about philosophy say that must be Hegelian dialectics. But have they thought about what Hegelian dialectics is, or rather is not? Because dialectics is what it is and what it is not at the same time. So it is not what it is, and it is what it is not. And this is dialectics. Hegel, so to speak, wrote an entire book about the logic of dialectics. Christian morality. I commit a sin. I do something bad. The bad turns into guilt if you're a Christian. So the negation of the bad is another form of bad. You feel bad because you feel guilty, but it's kind of the negation of the negative, because guilt is a negative which gives you the impulse to do good. So you do bad, you feel guilty, you do good. This is Christian morality. This is dialectical morality. But then you think you're doing good, and actually the good backfires. So, yeah, but the structure of Christian morality is sin, guilt, good action in order to remove the guilt and to feel good. When I breathe, I inspire in order to remain alive, but at some moment I have to expire to let the air go out, and then I breathe again. And if I breathe and I do not let the air go out, I will suffocate to death. And that's why breathing in, breathing out, that's a dialectical process. Globalism. You think, and many people think, that globalism tries to erase nationalism. But you, Michael, like so many people in the Western world, are a product of globalism, in a sense that your political identity is a revolt against globalism. And do you think that the globalists did not anticipate that the attempt to implement globalism would dialectically create a retreat towards nationalism? And this is globalism, namely that people in the West are acquiring, by attempting to negate globalism, they are acquiring a national consciousness of their history, of their culture, of their traditional religion. You are a product of globalism. The alt-right is a product of globalism. It's a dialectical reaction. Because globalism and nationalism, they are not opposed to one another. That's der Verstand, who thinks in dualistic opposition. It's in a conceptual unity. Another example is academia, like I have illustrated with Varg and Marie. It is because the educational system is so bland and dull that it is only by revolting against the formal aspect of academia that one can acquire real knowledge. But the real knowledge comes from the negation of academic knowledge, so it has the determinations of the negative within itself. That's the Aufhebung. In order to criticize the nonsense which is promoted about race, European history, etc., you first have to study the nonsense and then to negate. So the will to negate comes from the presence of false knowledge. So negative knowledge creates its own negation, and the negation of the negation creates real knowledge. I could go into detail, but the structure, basically, it's Hegelian. That's dialectics. Another illustration. Your channel. You promote very profound ideas, very elevated thoughts. This is a determination of intensity. And because your thoughts are very profound, and because intensity and extension in the realm of quantitative logic are in a conceptual dialectical unity, your channel will become successful one day. It is already successful, but really successful. Like, you will have a lot of followers because you speak very profound ideas. And my channel also, although now I'm a quantitative failure, I understand Hegel's logic, so I understand that eventually, because I speak the truth, because truth is a process, etc., etc., eventually my channel will become really successful. Yeah, another illustration of dialectics. I put the link to a channel that I discovered a few weeks ago, Overthink. It's Ellie Anderson, I think. It's a very attractive, very smart, blonde and blue-eyed American scholar which talks about Hegel. This is Hegelian dialectics because one could think naively Hegel is the pinnacle of German thought, blonde and blue-eyed attractive women, this is Germany. What could be better than a blonde, blue-eyed, very intelligent, attractive Hegelian woman? And then you discover, okay, she's anti-natalist, anti-racist, feminist, Marxist, deconstructionist. This is Hegelian humor. This is Hegel at its best, I might say. Another illustration from my own personal experience. In the early months of 2019, when I was already aware that I was reason and the negative, I started to think about the modern world in the West. And I was starting to study Hegel's logic thoroughly. And I said to myself, but everyone's talking about identity, the right to difference, diversity. There's these gender theories. They try to go beyond male and female. And I knew that Hegel criticized the law of identity of classical logic, namely that A equals A. Hegel says no, A equals A and B. And I started to think, but the modern Western world looks like it has been, it has popped out of the mind of Hegel. And people talk about identity politics, diversity, transgender all the time, but have they studied conceptually what the concept of identity is? No. And then I realized the West has lost its metaphysics. Maybe the world has lost its metaphysics. People use categories, reality, existence, identity, difference, cause, constantly, but have they go to the roots, so to speak? Have they thoroughly studied the meaning, the conceptual definition, and the concept of these categories? And I realized progressively that actually no, people talk without knowing what they say, and that I had to study in depth metaphysics, which is logic. And the more I study the abstractions of logic, the more I understand the world. Another illustration of dialectics in a way. Whitehead, the philosopher, says that the more mathematics became abstract in a history of science, the more the mathematicians elevated themselves in the realm of pure abstractions, the more the application of mathematics became widespread. The higher you go into the realm of abstraction, the more mathematics become applicable to many situations. It is simply because intensity and extension are in a conceptual unity. So it seemed strange to Whitehead, who was a very deep thinker, but actually it's perfectly logical. You say that most people don't feel the need to understand things for themselves because knowledge is a sin in a Christian religion. But that's why most people are not interested in knowledge. That's probably unconscious Christian wisdom. We should remain ignorant because there are things you would rather not know. But then you talk about the experts, the fact that in today's world, basically no one knows anything about anything. They just trust the experts. The experts have said this or that. Let's trust them. They are experts after all. And you say that quantum mechanics is used to justify the erasure of identity, or to defend or to promote incoherent identities, or the dissolving of categories. But the dissolving of categories is the logic. Speculative logic is nothing but a dissolution of the categories. This is what speculative logic is, as opposed to Aristotelian classical or probably even modern logic. Modern logic doesn't even have categories, but classical logic is fixed categories, and speculative logic is the dissolving of categories. So German thought, the peak of German metaphysics, you identify as a German, and I identify as a German as well, for better and for worse. The pinnacle of German thought is speculative logic and speculative thinking. You talk about the queer theory, and you say a clown world content ahead, which is partly true, but clowns can be quite scary sometimes, but they can be quite comical also. And the queer person, for lack of a better category, I will put the link to his speech. He says, classical Newtonian physics is obsessed with the universal formula that governs our reality. It's so fixed on resolute answers. But I don't know what you've studied about Hegel, but Hegel and Schelling and the German Romantics were also opposed to classical Newtonian physics. And they wanted to go beyond the fixed and resolute mechanistical view of Newton. She or he, the queer person, says, quantum physics reveals that there is no fixed reality, it's full of beautiful contradictions. This is exactly what Hegel's philosophy says. There is no fixed reality. Everything is full of sometimes beautiful contradictions. And he or she says, quantum physics is to Newtonian physics what queer theory is to heteronormativity. And he says, the queer person, male and female and gender and race, we categorize, people in the West categorize everything, but we have to go beyond. I am a queer person with no real fixed identity. Physical and philosophical models say that reality is just a set of contradictions with no real fixed foundation. This is what the greatest German thinker ever, who really did not really exist, but that's what German philosophy says. And he, this queer person, apparently he's a British, Iraqi, queer Muslim of many genders, or no genders at all. So, when I watched the video, I couldn't help but laugh. We have a British, Iraqi, queer, Muslim, transgender person who refutes Newtonian physics. So it's British imperialism being negated through an Iraqi immigrant, the white Anglo-Saxon male, Christian, being negated with a queer Muslim of many genders. And this is the typical English genius, namely Newton, being negated by the negation of British identity, which is typically Hegelian. So this is German philosophy messing up with the mind of the British, basically. I must be honest, when I watched the video, I burst into laughter because this is just Hegelian genius. Because this Newtonian, this anti-Newtonian, this queer British citizen speaks the truth about modern theoretical physics. What can I say? Yeah. Yeah. That's just an illustration of what dialectics is and is not at the same time. And if I wanted to make a serious explanation of why there are such phenomena, you would have to develop the entirety of British history, history of sciences, history of physics, British imperialism, British economics, Christianity in Great Britain, the how do you call this, the English Church. I don't know how you call this in English. A biological view of gender, the history of the 20th century, the history of academia, deconstruction. If you had to make a serious explanation, you would have to gather the totality of world knowledge. But how should I explain this? Dialectics is the movement of reason, which is the mind of God, which enters into contradiction with itself. When you or anyone watches this video, you will understand more about Hegel's philosophy. It can be quite comical, but it's the most serious knowledge and truth there is, namely that the categories of der Verstand, the one-sided limited categories, the mind of Kant, enter into contradiction. They fall into the negativity of themselves. If I say identity is identity, this is pure abstraction, because identity is relation to self. Relation means a negation. So identity is also difference. Something is also something else, because something is limited by something else, so it has its being in something else, etc. So the concepts which are opposed by der Verstand, which is Anglo-Saxon thinking, something is something, it's not something else. But no, if you think seriously, you think like a German, and you understand the conceptual unity of the determinations which are kept in their abstractions by der Verstand. This is what Hegel talks about almost in every page of his works. And if people need to have an illustration of speculative, rational, dialectical thinking, this queer, Muslim, British, Iraqi, theoretical quantum physicist, or at least talking about the theoretical aspect of quantum physics, this is an illustration. And this person brings knowledge about reality, our reality, my reality, on the quantum level. So, yeah, that's what I had to say.